The mansion still looms at the edge of Savannah, Georgia. 3 stories tall, its flawless white columns rise beneath the coastal sun, and its hand-carved mahogany doors glow warmly in the afternoon light. Every day, tour guides lead visitors past its gates, praising its balance, its symmetry, its architectural brilliance. Cameras flash, heads tilt upward in admiration. What they never say is this: the man who designed the house never lived in it, not even once. He planned every measurement with obsessive precision. He carved the doors himself, shaping each panel by hand. He calculated proportions down to fractions most men wouldn't notice. Yet for years, he was forbidden to cross the threshold of the very structure he brought to life. The only time he ever stood inside was the night his master died. When dawn came, he was found in the grand hall standing motionless, surrounded by something no one could explain. By the next day, the household had gone quiet. Within 48 hours, the authorities sealed the matter away. The family destroyed most of the records. Newspapers printed nothing at all. But the house remembers. The walls remember. And if you know where to look, traces of the truth are still there, hidden in plain sight. Before we return to the story of the Grenville estate and the man who built it, I need you to do something. If this story sends a chill down your spine, if you want to hear more forgotten mysteries like this one, tap the subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. It helps the channel more than you realize, and it tells me you want more stories like this. Now let's return to Savannah, to the year 1852, where it all began. The truth is, no one remembers his real name anymore. At least, not the name he was given at birth. Savannah in the spring of 1852 existed between 2 realities. Spanish moss hung from ancient oak trees like shredded curtains, casting long shadows across cobblestone streets. Wealth and suffering shared the same blocks, coexisting in a way the city's residents had stopped questioning long ago. The port never slept. Ships arrived from Charleston, New Orleans, Liverpool, and far beyond. Cotton bales towered along the docks. Hogsheads of tobacco rolled across the planks. Crates of indigo were stacked and sealed. And beneath it all came the human cargo of men, women, and children unloaded in chains. The stench of death lingering in the ship's holds weeks after they were emptied. That was the world into which his story began. In the historic district, townhouses rose like monuments to prosperity, built on that suffering. Their gardens burst with olives and chimneys that perfumed the humid air so heavily you could taste flowers on your tongue when you walked past. Raw iron gates protected brick courtyards where fountains trickled and wealthy families took their evening air, fanning themselves against the heat that pressed down like a wet blanket from April through October. The city hummed with commerce and contradiction. In the market squares, enslaved people sold vegetables they'd grown in whatever spare hours they could claim. In the parlors of Oglethorpe Square, ladies discussed literature and the latest fashions from Paris, while the people who cooked their food and washed their clothes remained invisible, present, but unacknowledged. In the counting houses along Factor's Walk, men in tailored suits calculated profits while conveniently forgetting the source of their wealth. It was into this world that the Grenville family had arrived 3 years earlier in the spring of 1849. They came from Charleston with considerable wealth accumulated from rice plantations along the Ashley River and shipping interests that connected Charleston to ports throughout the Caribbean. Marcus Grenville was 42 years old when he moved his family to Savannah, a tall man with graying hair and eyes that never seemed to settle on anything for long. Always searching for flaws, for imperfections, for things that didn't meet his exacting standards. His wife Catherine was 36, a woman who had learned over 16 years of marriage to move quietly through her own home, to speak carefully, to manage her household with efficiency while remaining nearly invisible to her husband unless he specifically required her presence. She had given Marcus 3 daughters: Virginia, who was 14 when they arrived in Savannah; Margaret, who was 11, and Anne, who was 8. No sons, which Marcus considered one of Catherine's many failures. though he rarely spoke of it directly. He didn't need to. His disappointment lived in the silence between them. Marcus had come to Savannah with a very specific vision. He wanted to build a mansion that would eclipse every other home in the city. Something that would cement the Grenville family's position among Savannah's elite. Something that would make people forget they were newcomers from Charleston, and instead see them as essential to the city's fabric. More than that, Marcus wanted perfection. He couldn't tolerate a crooked line, a mismatched corner, a proportion that felt even slightly off. This obsession had been with him since childhood, this need for everything to align exactly as it should. He'd hired his first architect within a month of arriving in Savannah. The man was well regarded, responsible for several notable buildings in the city, but when he presented his plans for the Grenville mansion, Marcus had rejected them immediately. The front portico was too narrow. The windows lacked proper proportion to the walls. The interior flow felt cramped. The architect had tried to argue to explain his design choices, but Marcus had simply dismissed him and hired another. The second architect lasted 3 months before Marcus fired him. The third made it to preliminary construction before Marcus halted everything, claiming the foundation measurements were wrong. The fourth, fifth, and sixth architects came and went in increasingly rapid succession, each one unable to satisfy Marcus' demands for perfection. Catherine watched this parade of hired and fired professionals with growing concern. The costs were mounting. Their standing in Savannah society, which should have been solidified by now, remained uncertain because they still lived in a rented townhouse rather than a home of their own. Worse, people were beginning to talk. Marcus Grenville was getting a reputation as impossible to please, perhaps even unstable. Virginia, their eldest daughter, was more direct in her assessment. "Father is going mad," she told her mother one evening in May of 1852. "Everyone says so. Elizabeth Harrington told me her father says Marcus Grenville has lost his mind over this house that will never be built." Catherine had no response to offer. She feared her daughter might be right. Then on a humid afternoon in late April of 1852, everything changed. Marcus had heard rumors about a slave working in a Drayton Properties workshop. Several men at his club had mentioned the craftsman in passing, speaking of furniture pieces and decorative panels that showed unusual skill. One man, Thomas Havsham, had been particularly emphatic. "The carved mantelpiece in my library," he'd said over brandy and cigars. "I've never seen anything like it. Every detail perfect, every line precise. The man who made it has a gift that borders on uncanny." Marcus had pressed for details. Who was this craftsman? Where exactly could he be found? Could he draft or merely execute designs created by others? Havsham had shrugged. "He's one of Drayton's people. Been in that workshop for years from what I understand. As for drafting, I couldn't say. But I can tell you this, when I showed him a rough sketch of what I wanted, he understood immediately, didn't need explanation. It was as if he could see inside my mind to what I was imagining. And what he produced was better than what I'd envisioned." That was enough for Marcus. The next day, he'd called for his carriage and directed the driver to the Drayton property. The workshop sat behind the main house, a long wooden structure with wide doors that stood open to let in light and air. The smell hit Marcus first. Fresh cut wood, varnish, linseed oil, and sawdust. Inside, 3 men worked at different stations. Marcus' eyes swept past them, searching until they landed on a man in the far corner, working at a bench beneath a window. The man was tall and lean, perhaps in his early 30s. With dark skin and hands that moved with absolute precision as he shaped a panel of cherry wood. He wore simple clothing, rough cotton shirt and trousers, but he worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon. Around him, the bench was immaculately organized, tools arranged by size and function, sketches pinned to the wall, wood shavings swept into neat piles. Marcus approached slowly, not wanting to disturb the work. As he drew closer, he could see what the man was carving. A hunting scene rendered in relief. Dogs in mid-leap, their muscles tensed, every hair on their coats suggested by careful tool marks. Hunters on horseback, their clothing folding naturally with the movement of their bodies. Trees with individual leaves, clouds with texture and depth. The piece was destined for a cabinet door, but it was art. Real art. Marcus stood there for a full 5 minutes watching. The carver knew he was there. His shoulders had tensed slightly when Marcus entered his space, but he didn't stop working. Didn't look up, just kept carving with steady, controlled movements. Finally, Marcus spoke. Who did this? The overseer, a squat man named Talbot with a red face and perpetually damp forehead, hurried over. That's Nathan, sir. Been working here near about 8 years now. Does all our detailed work. Finest carver in Georgia if you ask me. Can he draft? Marcus asked, his eyes never leaving the carving. Talbot hesitated, glancing at Nathan's back. Sir, he's taught himself some. Draws out his designs before he carves them. Has to for work this detailed. Show me. Talbot looked uncomfortable. Mr. Drayton ain't here presently, sir. I'm not sure I should be showing. Marcus pulled out his wallet and placed several bills in Talbot's hand. Show me everything. Money had a way of resolving uncertainty. Talbot led Marcus to a corner of the workshop where Nathan kept his materials. There, carefully stored and protected from sawdust and moisture, were dozens of drawings, architectural sketches, floor plans, elevations of buildings that didn't exist, details of moldings, staircases, doorways, windows, all rendered in careful, precise lines with whatever materials Nathan had been able to acquire. Charcoal on scraps of paper, pencil on the backs of ruined documents, even designs scratched into pieces of flat wood. Marcus recognized immediately what he was looking at. This wasn't the work of a craftsman who could copy designs created by others. This was the work of someone who understood architecture itself, someone who could see a building complete in his mind and translate that vision into technical drawings. His hands trembled slightly as he went through the sketches. A plantation house with perfect Greek revival proportions. A church with a soaring steeple that seemed to defy gravity while remaining structurally sound. A library with built-in shelving designed to maximize space while maintaining elegance. None of these buildings existed. Marcus realized they were all imagined, all created in Nathan's mind and captured on paper. I want to buy him. Marcus announced, his voice tight. Go find Drayton. Tell him Marcus Grenville wants to purchase Nathan today. Talbot's eyes widened. Sir, Mr. Drayton sets considerable store by Nathan. I don't think I'll pay double whatever Drayton thinks he's worth. Triple if necessary. Go now. The negotiation took 3 days to complete. Drayton was indeed reluctant to part with his most skilled craftsman. But Marcus was persistent, and more importantly, he was willing to pay an amount that made refusal financially irresponsible. The final price was extraordinary, $2,000, nearly twice what Drayton had expected, and far more than most skilled craftsmen would command. But for Marcus, it wasn't about the money. It was about finally getting what he needed. Someone who could transform his vision of perfection into reality. Someone with the skill to execute and the intelligence to design. Someone who could give him the mansion that 7 architects had failed to deliver. Nathan arrived at the Grenville property on May 1st. 1852. He came in the back of a wagon carrying nothing but his tools wrapped carefully in oiled cloth and a small sack containing his few possessions. Marcus met him not in the house, but in the rear garden, where a small building had been hastily converted into a private workshop. The building had been a carriage house once, but Marcus had ordered it emptied and fitted with work benches, storage for materials, and windows that provided good light. It was better than most slave quarters, certainly better than Nathan had expected. Marcus stood in the doorway, backlit by the late afternoon sun. I've seen what you can do, he said without preamble, without introducing himself or offering any courtesy. I want you to design a mansion. My mansion. I want it to be the finest home in Savannah, perhaps in all of Georgia. I want every detail to be perfect, every measurement exact, every proportion ideal. Can you do that? Nathan had set down his tools carefully before answering. He looked at Marcus directly, something that made Talbot, who'd accompanied him, draw in a sharp breath. But Marcus didn't seem to notice or care. I can try, sir, Nathan said quietly. Trying isn't good enough. I need certainty. I need to know that you understand what I'm asking for. Nathan held Marcus's gaze for a long moment. Then, yes, sir, I can do it. I can design what you're describing. I'll need time and materials, and I'll need you to tell me exactly what you want, but I can do it. Marcus smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. It was a cold smile, satisfied, but not warm. Good. You'll work here in this workshop. You'll have access to whatever materials you need for drawings and models. Paper, pencils, ink, whatever you require within reason. You'll draft the plans and I'll review them. When I approve the final design, you'll oversee the construction. You'll make sure every detail is executed exactly as drawn. He paused and his voice dropped lower. But understand this, Nathan. You will design this house. You will supervise its construction. You will ensure its perfection, but you will never set foot inside it. Not once. Not ever. You will see it only from the outside, only from doorways and windows. The mansion is not for you. It will never be for you. Do you understand? Nathan's expression didn't change. I understand, sir. One more thing, Marcus continued, pulling a document from his jacket. Your name, Nathan, is too common, and you came with no family name. From now on, you're Nathan Grenville. It'll make the paperwork simpler and it'll establish that you belong to this household. He handed Nathan the document, a bill of sale with Nathan's new name already written in. Nathan took it, looked at his new name written in someone else's hand, and nodded once. Marcus turned to leave, then paused at the door. I expect preliminary sketches within 2 weeks, floor plans within a month, full architectural drawings within 3 months. Can you meet that schedule? Yes, sir. Then we have an understanding. Marcus left and Nathan stood alone in his new workshop, holding a piece of paper that declared him property of Marcus Grenville while simultaneously giving him the task of creating something magnificent that he would never be allowed to experience from the inside. Talbot, still standing in the doorway, shook his head. That's a strange arrangement if you ask me. Building something you can't never enter seems like torture. Nathan carefully folded the bill of sale and placed it in his sack. Perhaps, he said quietly, or perhaps it's an opportunity. Opportunity for what? Nathan didn't answer. He was already looking around the workshop, mentally cataloguing the space, planning where to set up his drafting table, where to store materials, how to organize the tools. His mind was already working on the problem Marcus had given him, already seeing possibilities, proportions, solutions. Opportunity to build something that lasts, he finally said. Something that outlives all of us. Talbot snorted. You got a strange way of looking at things, Nathan Grenville. Nathan began unwrapping his tools, laying them out with careful precision. Maybe so, he said. But strange ways of looking at things sometimes see what others miss. The first 2 weeks were spent in preparation. Nathan needed to understand exactly what Marcus wanted, and Marcus, for all his demands for perfection, had difficulty articulating his vision. He knew what he didn't want. He'd rejected 7 architects' plans after all. But explaining what he did want proved more challenging. They met each evening in the workshop, Marcus pacing while Nathan sat at his drafting table making notes and quick sketches. I want grandeur, Marcus would say, but not ostentation. Elegance, but not frivolity. I want people to enter the house and immediately understand that they're in the presence of something exceptional. Nathan would nod, his pencil moving across paper. How many rooms, sir? Enough for entertaining. A ballroom, a proper dining room that can seat 20 drawing rooms, parlors, a library, upstairs bedrooms for family and guests, the usual domestic offices, and the style, sir. Greek Revival is popular currently. But Greek Revival, Marcus interrupted, but done correctly. Most of these houses ape Greek temples without understanding the proportions. I want authentic Greek proportions, authentic understanding of classical architecture. This was useful information. Nathan began sketching column ratios, pediment angles, the mathematical relationships that made Greek architecture work. The lot is here, Marcus said, unrolling a survey map. 3 acres. The house should be set back from the street, approached by a curved drive. Gardens front and back. The facade should face southeast to catch the morning light. Nathan studied the map, already visualizing the house in relation to the land, the way sunlight would move across it throughout the day, the sight lines from the street. Over the following weeks, the design began to emerge. Nathan worked from dawn until well past dark, sometimes forgetting to eat until someone from the main house brought him food. The initial sketches became more detailed drawings. The drawings became precise floor plans. The floor plans became elevations showing every exterior detail. Catherine occasionally watched from the upstairs windows of the rented townhouse, seeing lamplight burning in the workshop long into the night. She wondered what drove man to work so intensely on something he would never truly possess, never truly experience. But she didn't ask. In her world, such questions were inappropriate. Marcus reviewed each drawing with obsessive attention, sometimes spending an hour examining a single sheet, checking measurements, verifying proportions. Most of the time he found no faults. Nathan's work was precise, mathematically exact, aesthetically refined, but occasionally Marcus would point out some detail that didn't satisfy him, and Nathan would return to his workshop to revise. The front portico, Marcus said during one review session. The columns, you have them at 6 feet in circumference, correct? Yes, sir. Based on the height and the load they'll bear. 6 feet provides proper proportion according to make them 6½ foot. The visual weight needs to be greater. Nathan paused, pencil hovering over paper. Sir, that would throw off the ratio between 6½ foot. Marcus repeated, I know what I want. Nathan made the change, then spent the next 3 days recalculating every related measurement to ensure the proportions still worked. Increasing the column circumference meant adjusting the spacing, which affected the portico dimensions, which influenced the facade proportions, which required modifications to the window sizes and placements. It was like pulling a thread in a tapestry. One change rippled through the entire design, but Nathan made it work. He always made it work. By August of 1852, the complete architectural drawings were finished. Nathan had produced over 60 detailed sheets showing every aspect of the mansion, floor plans for all 3 levels, 4 exterior elevations, sections showing interior heights and construction details, enlarged details of moldings and cornices, specifications for materials, even drawings of custom furniture pieces designed specifically for certain rooms. Marcus spent an entire week reviewing the complete set. He went through them in the workshop, spreading them across every available surface, moving from sheet to sheet, checking how details related to each other, verifying that everything worked together as a unified whole. Finally, on a Thursday evening in late August, as cicadas screamed in the trees and heat lightning flickered on the horizon, Marcus set down the last sheet and looked at Nathan. It's perfect, he said quietly. Every detail, every measurement, it's exactly what I wanted. Even the parts I didn't know I wanted until I saw them drawn. Nathan felt something release in his chest. A tension he'd been carrying for months. Thank you, sir. Construction begins in September. Marcus continued. I've contracted with Hollis & Sons for the building work. They're the best in Savannah, but you'll supervise. You'll be on site every day checking every detail. Nothing gets built unless it matches these drawings exactly. Understood? Yes, sir. Marcus began rolling up the drawings carefully. This house will make my reputation in Savannah. It will establish my family among drawings. I assumed they'd been destroyed or lost. These prove father lied about the design, about his vision, about everything. Yes. Virginia sat down heavily. What should we do with them? Catherine was silent for a long moment. I don't know. But the question became more complicated later that evening when a housemaid made another discovery. While cleaning the main hall, she'd found something behind a decorative panel near the grand staircase, a small cavity in the wall, and inside it, a notebook. The maid brought it to Catherine, who opened it with trembling hands. It was Nathan's journal. The journal Catherine had told him she'd found and read. But now she realized there were 2 journals. The one she'd found before was different, smaller, less detailed. This one was larger, more comprehensive. Catherine read it alone in her sitting room as November darkness fell outside her windows. The entries began in May 1852, and continued through November 13, 1859, the day before Marcus died. The journal documented everything: the design process, construction challenges, the strange satisfaction and frustration of creating something beautiful while remaining invisible. But this journal went further than the first one. It described the hidden geometry in specific technical detail. It explained the purpose of each symbol, each calculated proportion, and it revealed something Catherine hadn't fully understood. Nathan had created a complete secondary architecture within the mansion, invisible to everyone but him, a language written in space and light and mathematical proportion. One passage dated March 1858 was particularly revealing. The house is a text written in the language of geometry. Most people read only the surface: beautiful rooms, elegant proportions, pleasing details. But there's a deeper text beneath that surface, accessible only to those who understand the mathematics. I've written my autobiography in this house. Every calculation reflects something I believe about order and beauty. Every proportion embodies an idea I couldn't speak aloud. The house is my voice finally given form. Catherine closed the journal and sat in the darkness thinking. Nathan had built his mind into the structure of her home. His understanding, his vision, his very thoughts were embedded in the walls and floors and ceilings. And she'd been living inside his mind for 4 years without knowing it. The next morning, she made a decision. She called for the estate lawyer and had new papers drawn up. Nathan would be freed and the workshop property would be deeded to him. Georgia law made straightforward manumission difficult, but with the lawyer's help, they found a legal framework that would grant Nathan protected status and independent ownership of the workshop. When Catherine informed Nathan of the decision 3 days later, he listened without visible emotion. "Why?" he finally asked. "Because you created something remarkable," Catherine said. "And because you deserve to own at least the place where you created it, even if you can't own the creation itself." "What about the house, the drawings, your husband's reputation? What about them? Will you tell people the truth that I designed it?" Catherine was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," she said honestly. Part of me wants to give you the credit you deserve to correct the false story that's been told. But part of me worries about what that would do to my family's standing, to Marcus' legacy, to my daughter's prospects." So the lie continues. "Perhaps for now, I'm sorry." Nathan accepted the papers granting him freedom and property ownership. He didn't thank her, didn't express gratitude, just took the documents and returned to his workshop. But something fundamental had changed. He was no longer property. The workshop was his. And the mansion remained what it had always been, his creation, even if the world didn't know it. As 1860 dawned, bringing with it the political tensions that would soon erupt into civil war, Nathan continued working in his workshop, now, as a free man, technically, now as the owner of his own space. Word continued to spread about his skills. Commissions came from families throughout Savannah and beyond. He never advertised, never sought clients actively, but those who knew, who understood quality, sought him out. But he changed after Marcus's death and his own manumission. He was quieter, more withdrawn. He worked with the same precision, but something essential had shifted. It was as if, having finally stood at the center of his creation and confirmed its perfection, having finally had his work acknowledged at least by Catherine, he'd reached some kind of completion. He never built another complete building, never designed another house. When asked why, he simply said he'd already created what he wanted to create. One perfect mansion was enough. Catherine occasionally saw him in the evenings standing in the garden looking at the mansion. She never approached him during these moments, sensing that his relationship with the house had become something deeply personal, something beyond her understanding. The war came in 1861, bringing disruption and change to everything. The Grenville household, like so many others, found its world transformed. Virginia's engagement ended when her fiancé Tilda Copyright enlisted and died at Shiloh. Margaret married a Confederate officer who returned from Gettysburg missing an arm. Anne never married at all, devoting herself to helping her mother maintain the mansion through increasingly difficult years. But through it all, the mansion stood, its perfect proportions and hidden geometry holding meanings that only one man fully understood. Nathan lived until 1883, continuing to work almost until the end. He never married, never left Savannah, never built another complete structure. The workshop became his world, filled with tools and sketches and projects. When he died at the age of 61, he left no will and no immediate family. The workshop and its contents were sold off to pay debts. His tools scattered across Georgia, ending up in the hands of craftsmen who never knew their origin. The year was 1882. 12 months before his death, Catherine had been gone for 7 years, and ownership of the mansion had passed to Virginia's son, Marcus Grenville II, named for the grandfather he would never know. The young heir had grown up with the official version of the house's history, his grandfather's grand vision, his genius, his legacy. Nathan was 60 by then, his body heavy with age and labor. One autumn morning, he sent a letter to the estate, formally requesting permission to see the house one final time. Out of curiosity more than obligation, Marcus too agreed. Nathan arrived on a cool October afternoon, moving carefully, his steps slowed by stiff joints and decades of work. Marcus too greeted him at the door. "Mr. Grenville," the young man said politely, "you wished to see the house?" "Only the main hall, sir," Nathan replied. "If that's acceptable." "Of course," Marcus too said, hesitating. "Though I do wonder why after all these years." Nathan offered no explanation. He walked to the exact center of the structure, the precise geometric heart of the building, and stopped. Slowly, he turned in place, studying what he had created more than 30 years earlier. The plasterwork remained flawless. The cornices were still sharp and elegant. The grand staircase appeared to float, defying its own weight. The proportions were balanced. The hidden geometry still functioned exactly as it had been designed to. Servants who witnessed the moment later said Nathan smiled. It was the only time any of them had ever seen such an expression cross his face. "It's still perfect," Nathan murmured, more to himself than to Marcus too. "After all these years, exactly as it should be." Marcus too, what?